You're listening to Health Professional Radio. My name is Wayne Buckler, and joining me today is an unusual guest for Health Professional Radio, a little bit down the line of Health Academy and a little bit down the line of our Professional Care series, but kind of in the middle there. Shayne Higson joins us from Australia. Shayne, welcome to Health Professional Radio.
Hi, Wayne.
Now, Shayne, I deliberately haven't said where you're from because I wanted you to tell us where you're from and to explain what it is you do.
I'm a spokesperson for Go Gentle Australia, which is a new organisation. It was established by Andrew Denton in the middle of last year, and our aim is to help relieve the distress and suffering experienced by Australians who have an incurable or terminal illness, but also the distress and helplessness of their families and carers. So we argue for the right of all Australians to have a choice about what happens to them at the end of their lives, and we believe that people should not be forced to endure cruel and unavoidable suffering. Thanks to Andrew, we got a high profile, and over the last 9 months or so, we've been actively involved in the campaign to introduce assisted dying laws, supported, of course, by the various state dying with dignity organisations who've been lobbying for decades.
I did hear Andrew Denton speak at a press club breakfast where he said he was going to light a fire, and it seems like he might have been a little bit successful in that.
Well, that's true, yes. No, we definitely feel that momentum for change is building, and we're seeing growing support from various groups, doctors, nurses, palliative care, cancer support groups, disability community, the elderly, the legal fraternity, and luckily a growing number of politicians from most political parties. So we know we've already got at least 75% of Australians who support the legalisation of assisted dying, but we hope to galvanise that public support so that politicians can no longer ignore the suffering that is occurring because we don't have a law.
Now, Shayne, many of our audience are clinicians. We have lots of doctors and nurses in both acute care in hospitals and in aged care. And for them, the idea of assisted dying is very much an everyday, in-your-face kind of question. Given that they work in that clinical area, what would you like them to know as a result of hearing you today?
Well, I suppose there's a few things. The first is that I'd like to point out that assisted dying laws can and do work safely and effectively. I think it's possible that many of your listeners may still be unaware of just how many jurisdictions around the world have actually legalised assisted dying. So right now, there are over 200 million people worldwide who can legally be assisted to die. In Europe, it is legal in Switzerland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany and Luxembourg. In America, it's legal in Oregon, Washington, Vermont, Montana, California was last year, as was Colorado, and also the District of Columbia, which includes the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And there's also a number of other American states who are currently in the process of introducing similar laws. Just last week, the Senate in Hawaii passed an assisted dying legislation with a vote of 22-3, so that bill will now proceed to their House of Representatives. But I suppose, in my opinion, one of the most significant countries to legalise assisted dying recently is Canada, because I think that their society is probably very close to ours in terms of value. Probably one of the most surprising countries is Colombia in South America. But the reason why so many jurisdictions are now legalising assisted dying is because they've been operating for many years. In the case of Oregon, it's 20 years. And they've been proven to work safely and effectively. So they provide a compassionate choice, basically in the face of unrelievable suffering at the end of life. So that'd be one of the points. I've also, I basically like to say that to continue to deny dying patients a choice basically means that people are going to continue to suffer. So again, I'm sure your listeners in particular will be well aware of the fact that despite the very best of palliative care, there are still some patients who will experience unrelievable suffering and what many of us refer to as bad deaths. Mm-hmm. My own mother was one example. She died from an aggressive brain cancer, and the end stage was really awful, despite the fact that she was treated by one of Sydney's top palliative care specialists. So bad deaths are really traumatic for the patient, but they're also traumatic for the family, and I'm pretty sure they're traumatic for the medical staff as well, especially the nurses who work on the front line and support the patient and family. And we know that the nurses are very supportive. So hopefully with their support and others, we might see law reform. Because the problem is with palliative care, they won't deliberately hasten a death. So under the current law, a fear of prosecution can make doctors hesitant to provide pain relief, in great enough quantities, for fear that it's going to have the secondary effect of shortening life. And we know there's some doctors who do deliberately hasten a death, but they do risk prosecution, so most doctors won't take that risk. Probably the third point that I'd like to stress is that for people not to be fooled by the scaremongering from our opponents, and to please look at the evidence, because opponents of assisted dying will say just about anything to block law reform. They claim that everyone's at risk: children, the disabled, the elderly, even the frail and the lonely. They claim if we introduce these laws that people will literally be murdered by the state. So these claims really show just how desperate they're getting. But the truth is that these laws, the ones being proposed here in Australia, are for a very small number of people. The laws in Victoria, New South Wales and Western Australia that are all being drafted are for patients who are suffering from a terminal illness. But not only do they have to be have a terminal illness, you also have to be an adult, you have to be mentally competent, you have to be at the end stage of your terminal illness, and you have to be suffering. And there are, of course, many other safeguards, such as 2 independent doctors have to confirm the prognosis and approve the request. There's cooling off periods, etc. And most importantly, only the dying patient can make the request. So the laws are completely voluntary, not just for the patient, but also for the doctors and nurses. So no one's going to be forced to take part, no matter what their reasons for objecting. And I think probably it's also possible that listeners may not realise that we're talking about assisted dying and not voluntary euthanasia. The difference being that if a patient qualifies, a doctor is not giving a lethal injection, as they do in Belgium and the Netherlands, but they're simply writing a prescription for life-ending medication, which the patient then self-administers if and when it becomes necessary. So that's how it works in America. So that's the model that most states are following. And for many people, just having that control is enough. It has a really excellent palliative effect. In Oregon, where they've had the law, as I said, for over 20 years, nearly 40% of patients don't end up taking the medication. And also the number is quite small. In Oregon, it's less than 0.5% of all deaths.
You're listening to Health Professional Radio. My name is Wayne Buckler, and my guest today is Shayne Higson, who's talking on behalf of Go Gentle Australia. And we've been talking about the work of Go Gentle in Australia, and in particular, assisted dying legislation. Now, Shayne, why do you think this is such a difficult question for legislatures? Because it's been in parliaments before in Australia, hasn't it?
Oh, it does, yes. There's been over 50 attempts to legalise assisted dying. Some might say it's difficult because it's literally a matter of life and death, but I feel that there are 2 key factors stopping it. First, there are conservative elements both in the church and the medical profession, creating a culture of fear. And second, too many politicians, and sadly probably doctors as well, are not educating themselves on how these laws actually work. We saw that this happen in the recent debate in South Australia, where the Dying with Dignity bill was narrowly defeated. There was a tied vote of 23-all, and the Speaker had to use his cast and vote to reject that bill. That was just in November. Mm-hmm. So while some MPs did openly oppose that particular bill on religious grounds, others were heavily influenced by a really carefully orchestrated campaign of fear and misinformation. So but propagated by both religious groups, but also some sections of the medical community. So sometimes that influence was covert. For example, Family First put pressure on some MPs in marginal seats and threatened to not, to preference against them at the next election if they supported the bill. And then other times it was sort of more public, with priests literally instructing their congregations to complain to their local members about the dangers of state-sanctioned killing, they called it. And many of the MPs actually took up that phrase, state-sanctioned killing, in the debate, even though the laws that were being proposed there and are being proposed in other states were basically to help people who are being killed by disease, so not by the state, and the decision about whether they actually do end their suffering caused by the disease is solely in the hands of the patient. So it's far from state-sanctioned killing. But, we had the Catholic-based anti-euthanasia lobby group called HOPE, and also the Australian Christian lobby, basically bombarding MPs, even as late as the morning of the debate, with misinformation.
It is certainly a topic that brings up lots of passion amongst the various sides of the debate. Shane, I hope that today our audience gets a little passionate about it. How can they get more information, and how can they get in touch with you?
Well, Go Gentle Australia has a website, so it's www.gogentleaustralia.org.au. But there's also a lot of other websites. Dying with Dignity organisations in every state have good websites, and they're very informative. And there's also similar organisations in Canada, the UK and America. I mean, I've been involved with this campaign for 4 years now, and I'd also be happy to personally answer any questions that your listeners have. So they can email me directly. My email address is Shayne, spelled SHAYNE, at gogentleaustralia.org.au, or they can even call me on my mobile. I'm happy to give my mobile out. It's 0428 326 358, because I know that that people, as I said, not everyone has the same information as I do, and I'm happy to answer questions. And I really do believe that when people learn the facts about assisted dying, I think that they would support giving people that choice. It may not be a choice that they would make for themselves, perhaps, but I think once they know the facts, they'll no longer deny other people a choice when there's unrelievable suffering at the end of life.
Shane, I know you're very busy with what's going on. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your passionate viewpoint today.
Thanks very much, Wayne.
And listeners, you're on Health Professional Radio. If you'd like to know more about the work that Shane's doing with Go Gentle Australia, or indeed you'd like to support the campaign, please head off to the website. There are opportunities there for you to both educate yourself and to contribute your assistance to that campaign. You're listening to Health Professional Radio. My name is Wayne Buckler.